Good Wednesday morning, everybody. Welcome into your FreightWaves Now Community Spotlight. I'm Kaylee Nix, and it's Wednesday, so we've got Alan Adler here ready to talk all things truck tech. Alan, thank you for joining us. What is up in the truck technology world right now?
Well, a little bit of a smorgasbord this week, Kaylee. This afternoon on the show, we're going to talk about smart highways, which is something that we really haven't talked about before. But there's a company called Canvue, which is they're a newer company, and basically they're working on trying to make our roads, especially our highways, smarter through using sensor technology to tell vehicles, cars and trucks, really, what might be going on out there, and transmitting that directly to them. It's something that's in its infancy at this point. There's a project in Michigan along I-94 between Detroit and Ann Arbor, where the University of Michigan is. And then on the truck side, there's a project down on State Route 130 in Texas that's near Austin in the Texas Triangle that they're working on. This is something that probably has a place as we start to see more autonomous vehicles, whether it's just assisted driving, like a level 2 type thing, or all the way up to level 4. It would be helpful for recognition of roadway debris and things like that. So this is some of the things that Canvue is working on. They're hoping to be a partner to the government rather than just a vendor. And through that, it's somebody's going to have to pay for this. They are a for-profit company. They raised about $130 million. So, they've got a good start, but ultimately they're going to need some contracts, and they're going to need some believers on the policy side to help them get where they want to go.
I think that this is super fascinating because one, it has, as you mentioned, a really big place in our industry when we're talking about the development of autonomous routes, specifically in places like the Texas Triangle, where you see a lot of construction going on. There's a lot of traffic, there's a lot of construction, and the road conditions change very much on even an hour-to-hour basis sometimes. And when I think about this type of technology, I think about it in the way that we're currently seeing it through things like Apple Maps or third-party sources like Waze, right? But a lot of that information is crowdsourced. Like Waze depends on people that are, putting in, oh, there's a giant piece of plywood in the road here on this mile marker of I-35 outside of Austin. Smart highways is different, right? Because you're talking about actual technology that is kind of like real-time feedback between the roadway and the drivers. Is that correct?
Right. And it's not going to get the mile marker wrong, like a lot of times would happen with Waze or something like that, because, that's exactly an example that that the CEO mentions, on the show. He says that, you've got things. This is Tyler Duvall we're talking about. Tyler actually worked in the government in the Department of Transportation for, I think, 7 years. And, he said, sometimes what happens with, crowdsourced material or other data is that it turns out to have, kind of a bad origin, and that takes emergency crews and things like that a lot of time to figure out where it really happened. So this is one of the things. I think the other thing that sensor technology brings you is more efficient road use. I mean, I asked Tyler about things like, the Spaghetti Junction in Atlanta and some of the areas that the American Transportation Research Institute reports on every year in their bottleneck study. And he said, that's exactly the kind of stuff they're looking at. They need to make sure that they can get the support, whether that's the government paying for it or whether we get to a vehicle mile traveled VMT type system. Gas taxes, maybe not as effective, especially as you get more electric vehicles out there. The trust fund for the highway system, which really is getting on towards 70 years old now, since Dwight Eisenhower brought it to us in the 1950s, is something that there's really not been any major changes. Yes, we fix bridges, we fix roads and things like that, but we haven't really changed anything. We haven't really modernized the system, and that's what Canvue is hoping to do. So I think that there is a lot of hope for this. I think there's some redundancy. It's a kind of a cloud to cloud thing in terms of, a lot of TMS systems out there will tell you a lot of information. I think the idea is that these apps that Canvue wants to use will fit right into that, whether it's a platform science or some other type of aggregator. But this is a part of technology that we haven't talked much about, and I thought the Canvue story makes for a good watch or a good listen today.
I definitely absolutely agree with that. And this is maybe getting into a little bit of the nitty gritty here, which you guys might dive into in the episode, I don't know. But any thoughts on what it looks like for like real time route mapping and adjustments? Is that something that they're looking at doing, especially on the autonomous route? Say, again, use that example of plywood outside of Austin on I-35, right? If they see that happen in real time and you've got an autonomous truck that is maybe 10 miles out from the situation and has the ability to reroute, are we talking about that type of real time rerouting and mapping technology coming and playing a part?
I don't think we didn't know. We didn't talk about it, but I don't think this is high def mapping. I mean, that's what a lot of the autonomous companies have done. Some have done more of it than others. And then, the trucks as they travel, the autonomous trucks, if they see something, then it becomes known to all of the trucks, that are using that autonomous system. We didn't really get into that, and I don't think it'll get into route mapping as much as it will be a better steady state of the highways themselves, if that makes sense. I think the idea is, let's fix some of these areas, and make them perhaps more live time reaction than routing and things like that. Because this doesn't get down to the individual trucks. This is sort of the greater good kind of discussion.
Like, let's fill our blind spots before we go and completely replace and grab some bigger mirrors. Alan, when it comes to the newsletter coming up later on this week, what can we expect from you on Friday?
Well, I told you it was a smorgasbord, and it really is. Two things on Friday. One, real happy to, last Friday after we had published, Aurora Innovation announced that they had raised another $420 million through a stock sale. They had announced that they were going to go to the market, go to the capital markets to try to raise some money. This is significant because they have some money. They've got $1 billion in cash on their books. Now they've got what, 1.5 billion, and they still need a little bit more to get all the way to commercialization for their autonomous Aurora driver system in 2027. But we have a short interview with David Madej, who is the CFO, someone I actually knew back in my GM days. He worked at General Motors in those days. But David, we talked more on the finance side and runway, actually extending Aurora's runway financially out to, say, mid 2026 at this point, and gets them much closer to this idea, with their partners, with Volvo Truck and with PACCAR, of actually installing their system on the assembly line. And this is something that, they announced more than a year ago they'd be working with Continental to do that. So these are all things, all this money is aimed at the commercialization and, sort of the thousands of autonomous trucks versus, say, 10 or 20. So we have that. And then we also have a lengthy interview, really, which we talked to Alan Schaefer from what used to be known as the Diesel Technology Forum. 10 months ago, they changed their name, and now they're the Engine Technology Forum. So the first thing we talk about is, one, I missed it, okay? I mean, I'll flat out say I missed this last October. And when I Google searched it, most people did too. There was like one story about the name change. And so it was a rebranding. And in some ways, I won't say it repudiated diesel because it doesn't, but it takes this sort of very charged word that has become sort of, oh, well, that's dirty old diesel, out of the mix. And so they can talk about internal combustion engines, they can talk about hydrogen combustion engines or natural gas combustion engines, but they're and diesel if they want to. But the fact is that nothing's really changed. But that one word name change certainly puts them in a little better position in terms of getting their message out. So we started there with Alan Schaefer. He's a real smart guy, and very, very well spoken on these subjects. So it's not a video interview. It's actually an interview that we did by phone, but it's something that a lot of really great insights from him in terms of where some of this is heading, up to and including the presidential election. So I think that'll be interesting for the readers on Friday, along with that video interview, that what we call a Truck Tech Short now, I guess, with Dave Madej. So pretty good start on the newsletter, I guess.
There you go. And if you want to catch that, go on over to freightwaves.com, drop down that newsletters tab, click Truck Tech, and hit subscribe. Alan, thanks for joining us this week. We will see you on Friday for the newsletter and catch up with you more on Truck Tech next week.
Okay, great. Thanks, Kaylee.